Is now in session. Case number 1, ON1-2020. This is a case of United States versus Kara Bassett. My name is Harry Tillis. I'll be your presiding judge today. Scoring judges, please look to the 2 buttons on the lower left of your screen and turn off your video and audio if you have not already done so. These should remain off until the trial ends. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. This means the only people on the screen right now should be the advocates and me. With that, we'll call the case on the record. I will take appearances first from the government.
Good morning, Your Honor, and good morning, members of the jury. My name is Hannah Curphey, and I represent the people of the United States of America.
Ms. Curphey, is there any pretrial matter or matters that you want to address?
2 briefly, Your Honor. First, the people would note for the court, to avoid any confusion, that Exhibits 4 through 48...
We know all that. We got it.
Great. Second, Your Honor, Ms. Maya Dabrowski will be acting as my second chair. May I address her during trial to instruct her to display exhibits?
What is the defense's position on instructing the second chair, Mr. Reese?
Your Honor, there's no objection from the defense. We'd actually like to...
Both sides can do that. Ms. Curphey, anything else?
That's it, Your Honor. We're ready to proceed.
Very well. Does the government consent to conducting this trial in this virtual format and waive any defects arising therefrom?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Reese, your appearance, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Cole Reese. Today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Mr. Jared Nigra.
Good morning.
And together we represent the defendant, Ms. Kara Bassett.
Mr. Reese, are there any pretrial matters not yet addressed that the defense wants to address?
No, Your Honor.
Does the defense consent to conducting this trial in this virtual format and waive any irregularities as a result of conducting this trial virtually?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Are both sides ready for trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Before we move to opening statements, I want to make sure that everybody is in now speaker view, which means that you should be able to see, that button is in the upper right corner of your screen. Attorneys, please remember to mute your audio when you are not speaking. And with that, we'll turn to opening statements. In our jurisdiction, the party with the burden of proof goes first. Ms. Curphey, we will hear from you on behalf of the government. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. The defendant got what she wanted. Kara Bassett got exactly what she wanted. On August 18th, 2017, Don Clark, the then owner of the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park, was seen alive for the last time. You'll hear that a full week passed before he was reported missing by his wife, Kara Bassett. Today, Ms. Bassett is charged with murder in the first degree. In order for you, the jurors, to convict Ms. Bassett, we must today prove that Ms. Bassett killed Mr. Don Clark, and that she did so with malice of forethought and intent. In order to prove those elements, the people of the United States will call FBI Special Agent Steph Branham to the witness stand today. Agent Branham will tell you that she used GPS tracking to retrace Don Clark's movements that night. She began at the Elephant Park, where the victim and the defendant lived and worked. You'll hear today that Ms. Bassett was an elephant enthusiast. She despised her husband for the way he ran that park and treated those elephants. You'll see that Mr. Clark had filed for a restraining order against Ms. Bassett. You'll see the documentation of a power of attorney agreement that specifically stated that should Mr. Clark disappear, Ms. Bassett would seize all of his assets, including that park. Also at this elephant park, Special Agent Branham found 23 syringes of carfentanil, an elephant tranquilizer. You'll hear that this was inconsistent with the meticulous logs Ms. Bassett normally kept. One syringe was missing. You'll hear that just a few drops of this tranquilizer could kill an adult man. Following the aforementioned GPS data, Agent Branham next visited Big Gum Swamp. She gathered no apparent reason for Don Clark to have gone to that swamp on the day of his disappearance. But you'll hear forensic evidence suggesting that Don Clark was not there alone. Trace evidence will link Miss Bassett to that swamp. Trace evidence will link a wheelchair to that swamp. And trace evidence will link Miss Bassett to the van that Don Clark was supposedly driving that night. And while the evidence will put Miss Bassett behind the wheel, it will put Mr. Clark in the back of that van. Finally, you'll hear that Mr. Clark's van was abandoned at a local airport. Mr. Clark was never seen at the airport. His airplane was still in its hangar. It would seem that he just disappeared. But that's exactly what Miss Bassett wanted. You'll hear from defense witness Joe Young that Miss Bassett had a history of violent behavior towards the victim, Don Clark, over the way he ran that elephant park. You'll hear that within months of his disappearance, she had seized his assets thanks to the aforementioned power of attorney agreement and wasted no time in running that park just as she wanted. By the end of today's trial, you will know what happened that night. The evidence, both eyewitness and forensic, will tell the story of Mr. Clark's murder, how he was injected with elephant tranquilizer by his own wife, who drove 140 miles to wheel his body into a swamp with a wheelchair from the park they owned together. You'll know that Miss Bassett dumped his van at a local airport parking lot and went home, went to bed as if nothing had happened. She wasted no time in seizing his assets, turning the park into the sanctuary that she had always wanted. Miss Bassett got exactly what she wanted. It's time she gets what she deserves. At the end of today's trial, I'll ask that you return a verdict, guilty of murder in the first degree. Thank you.
Ms. Curphey, thank you for your opening statement on behalf of the government. Mr. Reese, the court will hear from you by way of opening statement on behalf of your client.
Yes, Your Honor. A rush to judgment. Members of the jury, when Miss Curphey just gave her opening statement, there were some things that she didn't tell you. There were some things she didn't tell you because there are some things about this case that Miss Curphey doesn't want you to know. She doesn't want you to know that the government's alleged victim, Don Clark, could very well still be alive today. She doesn't want you to know that even if he isn't, there are several suspects other than Miss Bassett who could have killed him. And Miss Curphey doesn't want you to know that the government's investigation in this case was a rush to judgment. But before we get to all of that, I want to start from the beginning. Members of the jury, this is Cara Bassett. She's 29 years old, and back in 2011, she married a man named Don Clark, and they opened an elephant zoo together. Don and Cara were happy. But everything changed on August 18th of 2017. Today you're going to learn that was the night that Don Clark disappeared. We don't even know if he's dead, yet the government has charged Miss Bassett with the murder of her own husband. And members of the jury, in order to meet that burden today, they need to prove a number of things. First, they need to prove that Don Clark is actually dead. Second, they need to prove that Miss Bassett was the one who killed him. And third, they need to prove that she did it deliberately and intentionally. Members of the jury, they won't be able to meet that burden because of the testimony you will hear from two witnesses that'll show you the government rushed to judgment. And now, as Ms. Curphey told you, first today, you're going to hear from an FBI agent named Steph Brenner. But I want you to focus on what Ms. Branham is going to tell you. Because the government, they are solely relying on her to prove Miss Bassett's guilt. But you will hear from Agent Branham, she never found Don Clark's body. Never found any evidence it was in that swamp that Miss Curphey just told you about. She never investigated Don's ex-wife who had threatened him before. And she never gathered any information about mafia businessmen who could be responsible for Don's disappearance. And next, you're going to hear from our witness, Joe Young, a producer who was working on a documentary about Miss Bassett when her husband disappeared. Today, Miss Young is going to walk you through all of the evidence that the government missed in their rush to judgment. She'll tell you she had thousands of hours of film the government never looked at. And she was barely interviewed by the FBI. Miss Young is also going to tell you that Don Clark owned a house in Costa Rica. You'll learn that she went there before coming to court today and found evidence that Don had been there after his disappearance. Members of the jury, once you hear all of the evidence, it will be clear that Miss Bassett is only on trial because the government rushed to judgment. But today, you have a chance to make right what the government got wrong. Because it's not about what Miss Bassett wanted or what Miss Curphey wants in today's trial. It's about the law and the facts. And the facts will show you that the government cannot meet their burden because they rushed to judgment. That's why we'll ask that you find Cara Bassett not guilty. Thank you.
Mr. Reese, thank you for your opening statement on behalf of your client, Cara Bassett. Before the government calls its witness, I will ask everybody to switch to gallery view. That button is in the upper right corner of your screen, and this will allow you to see the attorneys and witnesses at the same time. Ms. Curphey, if the government is ready, would you like to call a witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The people call Special Agent Steph Brennan to the witness stand.
Steph Brennan, please unmute yourself and confirm to begin with that you can hear both me and the prosecutor.
Yes, Your Honor, I can.
Very well. Ms. Curphey, you may inquire by way of direct examination of the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent Brennan.
Good morning.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
And what qualifications do you have to hold that position?
I received training from Quantico in criminal investigations, interrogation, and evidence collection.
How did you become involved in this particular case?
I led the investigation into the disappearance of Don Clark, a 38-year-old male residing in Tallahassee.
How was Don Clark employed?
He owned Elephant Park, which is a zoo in Tallahassee, Florida.
Did Mr. Clark have any children?
Yes, ma'am, he did. He had a son named Phil Clark.
And are you familiar with the defendant, Cara Bassett?
I am.
What was Miss Bassett's relationship to Mr. Clark?
The defendant was married to Don Clark.
Did Bassett and Clark have any history with law enforcement?
Yes, they did, ma'am. Don Clark had attempted to file for a restraining order against the defendant, and he also filed for protection against abuse by his wife.
And before we proceed, did you uncover any other legal documentation regarding the relationship between Don Clark and Cara Bassett?
Yes, we did. We reviewed Exhibit 15, which is a power of attorney of Don Clark's, and in particular, we reviewed Clause 2, the disappearance clause.
What did this clause state?
It stated that if Don Clark were to go missing, the defendant would gain control of his assets.
Okay. During the course of your investigation, where did you visit?
We visited 3 areas: Elephant Park, the local swamp called Big Gum Swamp, and the local airport called the Belle Leone Airport.
And what led you to those particular locations?
We reviewed Exhibit 31, which are Don Clark's van records from the night he disappeared, and that exhibit indicates that Don Clark's van traveled to those 3 areas on the night in question.
Let's start with your search of the Elephant Park. What physical evidence did you gather there?
We gathered the defendant's boots and also Exhibit 19, which is a log of carfentanil.
Can I ask Ms. Dobrowski to please display Exhibit 19 using screen sharing? While we wait for that to load, Agent Branham, according to that log which you examined, how many syringes of carfentanil were remaining on August 18th of 2017?
The log indicated that there should have been 24 syringes there.
Excuse me, Ms. Dobrowski, can I ask for Exhibit 19, please? Thank you. Did your investigation corroborate the information contained within this log?
No, ma'am. We only found 23 syringes.
Did you ever locate the missing syringe of elephant tranquilizer?
We did not.
Are you familiar with Exhibit 17, a material safety data sheet for elephant tranquilizer?
I am.
Could we have Exhibit 17 displayed on screen, please? Special Agent Branham, are you familiar with that sheet? Do you have your own copy?
I do have my own copy. Would you like me to pull it up?
Yes, please. Could you read to the court section 1.3 of that sheet?
I can. Section 1.3. 1 second. Section 1.3 reads that a 10 milliliter syringe contains 10 milligrams of carfentanil, which is dissolved in methanol.
And can you read section 2.5 of that sheet?
I can. It states that carfentanil is fatal if 1 milligram is injected or swallowed. It is fatal if it is inhaled, and it is toxic if in contact with skin.
So could a single syringe of this carfentanil tranquilizer, like the one that went missing, kill an adult male?
Oh, absolutely. Full syringes are used on elephants that are about 6,000 pounds. So only a fraction of a raindrop is needed to kill 1 human adult.
Okay. Let's return back to that original investigation. You said that you next searched Big Gum Swamp. What did that search reveal?
We collected algae and mud samples from the swamp.
Did you, at any point in your investigation, uncover a clear reason for Don Clark to drive himself to Big Gum Swamp the night of his disappearance?
No, ma'am, we did not.
And you next went to Belle Leone Airport. What physical evidence did that search yield?
We found Don Clark's van present at that airport, and we were able to collect forensic evidence from that van.
Are you familiar with the forensic report that your team wrote?
Yes, I am.
Can you summarize the information under subheading hair on that report, Exhibit 5?
Yes, subheading hair indicates that we found 6 samples of Don Clark's hair in the back of the van.
And can you summarize the information under subheading algae samples?
Yes. We collected algae samples from the defendant's boots, from the brake and gas pedal of the van, as well as a wheelchair that was used around Elephant Park.
Can you summarize the information under subheadings algae conclusions?
Yes, ma'am. Using what's called a Redfield ratio, we were able to conclude that the algae found on the defendant's boots, the algae found on both pedals of the van, as well as algae found on the wheelchair, matches algae from Big Gum Swamp.
What did this suggest to you as an investigator?
The FBI concluded that it indicates that the defendant dumped Don Clark's body at Big Gum Swamp.
Objection, sir. Speculation.
Say more about why that's speculative, Mr. Reese.
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 702, there has been no foundation laid as to this witness's knowledge, training, skill, or experience. And to go into the fact that Miss Bassett, from the information that she reviewed, dumped Mr. Clark's body in a swamp, that's speculation because it isn't rationally based on her perception as a lay witness to say that based off the evidence that she reviewed.
Mr. Reese, what did you hear the witness's answer to be?
Your Honor, I heard the witness's answer to be that based off of what she had examined, the algae and the GPS records, that Miss Clark had dumped her husband's body in the Big Gum Swamp.
Mr. Reese, are you saying that the witness's answer was that the witness concluded that your client dumped the deceased's body in the swamp?
Yes, Your Honor, that was the belief of the FBI.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to drill down at. You heard the answer as the FBI concluded that Kara Bassett dumped the body.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Curphey, what about that?
Because this witness framed it as the FBI's own conclusion based on that forensic report, it's not speculation. She's not stating this as a fact, but as her conclusion.
Well, does this witness have authority to speak for the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation?
In this particular case, Your Honor, I would say yes, she has authority to speak on the FBI's conclusion regarding this case.
So you acknowledge that this is not the lead investigator's conclusion, this is somebody else's conclusion.
This is the conclusion of the lead investigator working as an entity of the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
Mr. Reese, it's your objection. Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor, this is just simply being used to say that this is this witness's conclusion. Just because it was made by the FBI as a whole doesn't make it any less speculation.
Identify specifically, Mr. Reese, what this witness is speculating about.
Your Honor, this witness is speculating about the occurrence in which Mr. Clark was killed, or the specific instances that led to him being killed and him being dumped in the swamp. That's speculation based off of the evidence that she reviewed. She's speculating as to how he was killed.
Are you saying that she lacks personal knowledge to reach that conclusion?
Not that she lacks personal knowledge to reach that conclusion. However, that would be an expert conclusion under Rule 702. So if this witness were tendered as an expert, maybe that's a conclusion she could offer. But as for now, it's not a proper lay witness opinion under Rule 701.
The opinion at issue here is, quote, the FBI concluded that Kara Bassett dumped Don Clark's body, unquote, or words to that effect. To this court, the key portion of the testimony is that this witness, the lead investigator employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is stating what her employer's conclusion is. It is not the conclusion as testified to of this individual witness. It is her lay opinion of what the organization concluded. Thus, as argued, the argument goes to weight. You can explore it on cross if you want, and the objection is overruled. The prosecution may continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Did you finish your answer, Agent?
No, I did not. It was the FBI's conclusion that the defendant dumped her husband's body at Big Gum Swamp, and we concluded this based off of the report from algae.
Agent, throughout the entirety of your investigation, did you find any evidence to suggest that Mr. Don Clark is still alive?
No, we did not. We reviewed his financial activity, including bank statements and credit card activity, which are stated in Exhibit 32. And we also looked for any eyewitness reports of sightings of him or from him reaching out to other people. There were no reports.
Did Mr. Clark hold assets elsewhere?
Yes, he did. He held assets in Costa Rica. He had indicated that he wanted to transfer them, but he was unable to do so before he disappeared.
Objection, lack of foundation.
What about that, Ms. Curphey?
Evidence has already been, exhibits have already been submitted into evidence with regards to Mr. Clark owning assets in Costa Rica.
What I hear the objection to is the implicit indication that there was a desire on the part of the alleged victim to transfer those assets.
May I respond to that with testimony from an exhibit, Your Honor?
Well, if you want to say why this isn't speculative because of exhibits that are pre-admitted, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Just one moment while I find that given statement. Excuse me. Exhibit 4 is a letter from the law offices of Mandy Tuminelli. It states that on August 4th of 2017, Clark told me he was looking at some properties in Costa Rica and that he wanted to close right away. I said we might need to liquidate some investments to purchase those properties. It later reads, I never did, as Mr. Clark disappeared before we could have worked out the details.
Mr. Reese, what about that? Does that letter change your objection at all?
No, Your Honor, this is still lacking foundation because there's been no foundation laid as to how this witness was familiar with that letter or as to how she specifically knew that Mr. Clark did in fact want to liquidate those assets.
May I respond, Your Honor?
If you can tell me that something in this record indicates that the FBI agent on the stand is familiar with this letter, yes.
Yes, Your Honor. It is stipulated that Miss Branham is familiar with Exhibit 4. Excuse me.
No, I agree with you. Nevertheless, the letter doesn't quite say what the government thinks it says. What the letter says is that Mr. Clark said he planned to pay with some money that was, quote, off the books.
The intention there is that he plans to pursue property in Costa Rica.
The letter also says Mr. Clark said he would soon want me to transfer a large portion of his assets to accounts in Costa Rica, but I never did. There's not enough here to establish that the alleged victim had assets in Costa Rica that he intended to transfer elsewhere, as the record currently stands and as the objection was argued. The objection sustained, the answer is stricken, and the government may continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Branham, did you contact law enforcement in Costa Rica as part of your investigation?
I did. I spoke to law enforcement officials in Costa Rica, as well as airstrip officers.
And what did this reveal to you?
They revealed that they had not sighted Don Clark in Costa Rica or at the airport, ma'am.
So given the forensic evidence, the lack of activity on Mr. Clark's bank account following his disappearance, what conclusion did you come to of the events that took place on August 18th of 2017?
Your Honor, I objected to the previous answer as hearsay. I'm not sure if the court heard. I believe you're on mute, Your Honor.
I did not hear it. What is the basis of your objection to the immediately preceding question?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness was discussing that Mr. Clark had reviewed documents that led, that Mr. Clark had revised, objection withdrawn, Your Honor. My apologies.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Not yet, because I thought I heard some sound, and I turned to write myself a note. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. The last answer in sum and substance to which, Mr. Reese, I think you were trying to make the objection was question, did you contact people in Costa Rica? And the answer was, yes, they told me that they hadn't seen Don Clark at the airport or elsewhere. Is that the answer you were objecting to?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you want to object to that answer? My concern here being that because of the delay, Mr. Reese might have lost the answer. So, Mr. Reese, the question is to you. Do you want to object to that answer?
Yes, Your Honor, I would.
On the basis of?
Of hearsay, Your Honor.
What about that?
Well, Your Honor.
Well,
oh, excuse me.
Right, they told me, right? I get your objection, and I'm sure the prosecutor does as well. We'll hear what her response is.
Your Honor, this isn't hearsay, as it comes from public officials. As the special agent testified, This was a statement made to her by police law enforcement in Costa Rica.
What rule supports the position that an oral statement of a public official is admissible as an exception to the hearsay doctrine?
I believe that would be hearsay exception 2B, although I can't say that with certainty. My apologies, Your Honor.
It's a public statement or a statement of a public official is your theory?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. The portion of the answer that says, yes, I contacted and discussed things with law enforcement overseas, that portion of the answer describes this witness's behavior and discloses no statement. So much of the objection that relates to that is overruled. The objection to the balance of the answer, the content of what overseas police law enforcement communicated, is sustained based on the argument before the court.
Yes, Your Honor.
And motion to strike, Your Honor.
Yes, as indicated.
Special Agent Branham, given the forensic evidence and the lack of bank activity on Mr. Clark's accounts following his disappearance, what conclusion did you come to of the events that took place on August 18th, 2017?
It is the FBI's conclusion, ma'am, that the defendant killed Don Clark using a toxin called carfentanil, dumped his body at Big Gum Swamp, drove his van to the Belize airport, then reported him missing.
Given that conclusion, what legal action did you take?
We arrested the defendant and charged her with murder.
Thank you, Special Agent Branham. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Very well. Ms. Curphey, thank you for your direct examination. Mr. Reese, you may inquire by way of cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent Branham.
Good morning, sir.
I want to start with something you talked a little bit about on direct examination. You mentioned a van that was driven to the Big Gum Swamp, didn't you?
Yes, we did. Don Clark's van.
Right, and you know that that van was driven to the Big Gum Swamp because you reviewed GPS records, didn't you?
That's correct, sir.
Ma'am, I just want to be clear. Those GPS records, they don't tell you who was driving that car, do they?
The records do not, but the forensic evidence does.
Let's talk about that forensic evidence then. Mr. Nigro, could we please get the second and third pages of Exhibit 5 on the screen? Ma'am, this is a report that you had your lab conduct, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you believe that Miss Bassett was the one who drove that van because this report says algae on her boots and in the van matched algae found at the Big Gum Swamp.
Yes, they had precisely the same Redfield ratio.
And Mr. Nigro, let's zoom in on the last sentence in the section marked conclusions. Agent, as the sentence says, you never tested the algae at the elephant park Miss Bassett worked at, did you?
No, sir, we did not.
So you have no idea if that's where the algae on Miss Bassett's boots and in that van came from.
That is incorrect. It is highly unlikely it came from Elephant Park, since it is highly unlikely for two swamps to have the exact same Redfield ratio.
But Agent Branham, you can't be sure because you never tested that algae, did you?
We did not.
And Agent Branham, this report, it doesn't tell you when that algae got on those items, does it?
No, it does not. Algae can remain on surfaces for months.
All right, as far as you know, that algae could have gotten on Miss Bassett's boots months before Mr. Clark went missing.
It's possible, sir.
As far as you know, that algae could have gotten in that van months before Mr. Clark went missing.
It's a possibility.
With that in mind, let's talk about that swamp itself. You went to the Big Gum Swamp in your investigation, didn't you?
We did, sir.
You were looking for Don Clark.
That's correct.
So you searched the area with trained dogs looking for Mr. Clark's scent.
Yes, we did.
Agent, those dogs, they didn't find Mr. Clark's dead body, did they?
They did not, which was partly expected considering the swamp is 13,000 acres.
Well, Agent, those dogs didn't find anything.
No, they did not.
You didn't find any trace of Don Clark.
No, we were unable to since his body was in the swamp.
But still, it's the FBI's theory that he's dead.
Yes, it is. We have not seen a shred of evidence or activity from his financial accounts or phone records.
It's the FBI's theory that he was injected with an elephant tranquilizer.
That is our conclusion, yes.
Let's talk about that tranquilizer. You think that it was injected into Mr. Clark because there was one tranquilizer missing from that elephant park, right?
Yes, sir.
Agent Branham, as you said on direct, you never found that missing syringe of elephant tranquilizer, did you?
We did not.
You never got to test it for fingerprints.
No, we were unable to since we did not recover the syringe.
So, Agent, even if the FBI's theory is correct, someone other than Miss Bassett could have used that tranquilizer.
They could have, but it is unlikely since the defendant was the last one on the property with Don Clark on the night the tranquilizer went missing.
Let's talk about just how unlikely that is. Agent Branham, you know that Mr. Clark has an ex-wife named Lisa Clark, don't you?
That is correct.
She knew where Mr. Clark lived.
She did.
And you know that at the time of his disappearance, Lisa Clark was sharing her children with Don Clark.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
You know that Lisa Clark was prone to outbursts around her husband.
Sometimes she was, yes.
You know that she had threatened him before.
She had threatened him, which is why we conducted an investigation into her.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I must object. These questions call for answers based on hearsay. You're on mute, Your Honor.
Say more about what you mean that these questions call on answers based on hearsay.
Opposing counsel is asking, you know that Lisa Clark threatened Don Clark, etc. Now, the only way that this agent would know that would be based off of an out-of-court statement that is here being offered for the truth of the matter, that Lisa Clark had strong negative feelings towards Don Clark.
What about that, Mr. Reese?
Your Honor, this is actually already an in-court statement. As Ms. Curphey brought up in her direct examination, Exhibit 4 was a letter that was pre-admitted from Don Clark's attorney to Agent Branham, and within that letter, all of these statements are included. Mr. Niger can put it on the screen if you'd like.
Well, Mr. Reese, why are you pursuing this entire line of questioning that seems question after question after question to begin with the words, you know that, you know that, you know that? Why are you doing that?
Well, Your Honor, we're about to ask this witness that despite
what you're about to ask, tell me what issue this ties to.
Yes, Your Honor, despite the fact this witness knew all of this, she never asked Ms. Clark a single question.
And to what overall point from your opening statement does that tie?
A rush to judgment, Your Honor, that this witness did not investigate thoroughly.
Ms. Curphey, what about that?
Well, Your Honor, whilst it is true that Exhibit 4 includes statements regarding Ms. Lisa Clark's relationship with Mr. Don Clark, that is still hearsay. It's still an out-of-court statement. Just because the letter itself is entered into evidence doesn't mean a statement that was told to Ms. Tuminelli is definitively true.
I agree with you, Ms. Curphey, that the contents of an exhibit are not necessarily true, and it's not the court's role to rule on the truth of an exhibit. It's the court's role to rule on the authenticity of an exhibit. Is this an exhibit that is what it purports to be? The pre-admitted exhibits, by consent or court order, are already in and meet that standard. Mr. Reese opened on a theory essentially of bad investigation, rush to judgment. The status of the agent's knowledge of certain facts or not are therefore relevant and pertinent. They're not hearsay because, number one, he is asking not about the truth of the statement, he's asking what the witness knew. The witness is, in essence, endorsing the knowledge. Moreover, it goes to the theory of effect on the listener, which is why the FBI proceeded the way it did, which was the defense theory. Therefore, the way the questions are being asked does not call for hearsay. It calls for an explanation of the investigation, and the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may continue.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Agent Branham, you knew all of that about those threats and about her being prone to outbursts, but you never asked Lisa Clark a single question.
No, she refused to be interviewed, but we still investigated into her.
Let's talk about something else, Agent Branham. You know that Mr. Clark had a house in Costa Rica, right?
Yes, he did, at Hermosa Beach.
He was doing business there?
That is what the defendant claims, yes.
Agent, it's possible Mr. Clark was involved with the Costa Rican mafia.
That is what the defendant claims.
And Agent, on the night that Mr. Clark disappeared, he got 2 texts from a number in Costa Rica, didn't he?
That is correct, he did.
Those texts were telling him to call that person immediately.
Yes, that is what it translates to.
He then called that person for 52 minutes, just hours before he went missing.
That is true, sir.
Agent Branham, you knew all of this at the time of your investigation, but you never asked that person from Costa Rica a single question.
No, we were unable to since it was an unknown number, but we still investigated into Costa Rican people to ensure that that is not what happened to Don Clark.
Agent Branham, you're saying you investigated into Costa Rican people, but you can't even tell us that person who called their name.
No, we can't, but we did speak to Costa Rican officials, sir.
Thank you, Agent Branham. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further at this time.
Your Honor, the people would inquire as to how much time remains for redirect examination.
First, let me thank Mr. Reese while I think about how that
My
wrapped
apologies.
up. Thank you for your cross-examination. We're going to ask for a time check with regard to the government, please. It's in the
All right.
chat. 26 seconds left for direct. Ms. Curphey, do you wish to use any or all of that time for redirect examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may inquire.
Special Agent Branham, to your knowledge, did Lisa Clark stand to benefit financially from the murder of Don Clark?
We did not find any evidence of such.
Did Cara Bassett stand to benefit financially from the murder of Don Clark?
Yes, ma'am. She would gain control of all of his assets according to his power of attorney.
And finally, did you find any evidence that Don Clark went to Costa Rica on the day of his disappearance or after?
No, ma'am. After a thorough investigation of Costa Rican officials and airstrip officers, we did not.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Curphey, thank you. Mr. Reese?
No recross examination, Your Honor.
Very well. The witness is excused with the thanks of the court. Does the government want to do anything else?
No, Your Honor. The people rest.
The government having rested, Mr. Reese, I understand you wish to present a case.
Yes, Your Honor, we would.
Would you like to call a witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Joe Young to the stand.
Joe Young, please unmute yourself and confirm that you can hear both Mr. Reese and me.
Yes, I can. Yes.
Very well. Mr. Reese, you may inquire by way of direct examination of the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good morning. Well, I have to admit, I'm a little offended you don't already recognize me, but I get it. I get it. I'm not usually on this side of the camera. But hello, my name is Joe Young.
Now, Miss Young, I know what you do for a living, but just for the members of the jury, where do you work?
I'm a television producer.
Did you ever work with someone named Kara Bassett to produce TV?
Oh, yes, of course. I worked with Kara back in 2015. She contacted me to start working on a documentary with her. It was entitled Elephant Queen, about her elephant sanctuary. Very interesting. You should make sure to check it out when it comes out.
I will, Miss Young. But before we go any further, I want to talk about that sanctuary and the park itself. How would you describe it?
Oh, okay. So it was not my typical work environment, I must admit, but it was very dirty, lots of mud, lots of grime. I mean, elephant parks are a very dirty business, literally.
Mr. Nigro, could we please get exhibits 23 through 25 on the screen? Miss Young, is this the elephant park that Miss Bassett and her husband worked at?
Yes, that's it.
We heard about some algae earlier today. Did you ever see Miss Bassett walk through the dirty, muddy parts of this park?
Oh, yes. I mean, all the time. That was her job. I don't know how she did it, but she did that every day.
Would her boots get dirty?
Very dirty, covered with mud and grime from the elephants.
Let's transition into something different. Were you at that elephant park on August 18th of 2017?
Yes, I was.
Did you speak with Don Clark that day?
I did, yeah. So around 6 p.m., I was talking to Dawn after a day's work of filming. I was actually talking to him about my upcoming trip to Mexico, but that's for a different time. But we were talking, and it was just a regular day until he got a text.
Mr. Nigro, let's get Mr. Clark's phone records and text messages on the screen, please. So, Miss Young, according to these records, Mr. Clark got 2 texts from a number in Costa Rica at 6 p.m. Did anything happen when he got those texts?
Yeah, so Don looked down at his phone. He saw something. His face went white. I mean, it was something from a drama movie. And then he said that he needed to deal with it, and he went away.
Objection, hearsay. Excuse me, Your Honor, again, you're on mute.
I am, and I'm sorry, I didn't do one of my typical things beforehand. For those of you who have seen me in live mock trial, what I do after the objection happens is I'm replaying it. You see it more dramatically here because I'm talking to myself if we're on the bench in real life, because I am talking through the objection, and then I'm waiting so that, because Zoom will pick up everything I say, till I'm done before going to you. So that's what's happening there.
Yes.
And I appreciate the reminders, because when I get there, I want to make sure that both lawyers can hear the argument and the ruling. Mr. Reese, what about that? Don said, blah, 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 blah.
Yes, Your Honor, we're not offering this for the truth of the matter asserted under Rule 801 to prove.
Why are you offering it?
We're offering it for the effect on the listener and to further delve into Mr. Clark's connection to Costa Rica, which is where this number is from.
What? Well, Ms. Curphey, let me ask you. The listener here is Joe Young, the witness, yes?
Yes.
Let's assume that we go along with what Mr. Reese says and that it's being offered for the effect on the listener. What other objection would you have?
In that case, I would object relevance. The effect on...
Why is that at all relevant?
Your Honor, this is relevant because it's going to this witness being concerned with Mr. Clark taking that call, and also to this witness and her thoughts on what happened in Costa Rica, which later goes into her trip to Costa Rica that we're going to discuss.
Okay. The portion of this that goes to the issue of the emotional condition of the alleged victim, Mr. Clark, is fully described in the witness's description of the physical nature of the reaction. All the words are hearsay. So much of the objection that relates to the words is sustained. So much of the objection that relates to anything else is overruled. Mr. Reese, you may continue.
Motion to strike that testimony.
To the extent indicated in the objection ruling, yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Niagara, let's put those phone records back on the screen, please. So, Ms. Young, according to these records, Mr. Clark then got a call from that person he then called that person in Costa Rica for 52 minutes. Did Don Clark have some kind of connection to Costa Rica?
Oh, yeah, of course. So Dawn actually had a home in Costa Rica, a beautiful little place in Hermosa Beach. I was a little jealous, but he often went there for business and other trips. He had a plane and a pilot's license, so he could really go anytime he wanted.
Let's talk about after Mr. Clark went missing. Do you know if the FBI ever investigated this case?
Yeah, they did. When I came back from my trip from Mexico on August 26th, I saw them at the elephant park.
At that point, how much footage did you have for your documentary?
Well, I mean, it was a big project and happened over 2 years. I would say over 2,000 hours of footage of Kara.
Did the FBI ever watch any of that footage?
No, they completely rushed past it, which is strange because we had 2,000 hours of footage of the person that they were arresting. So,
Miss Young, were you ever interviewed by the FBI?
okay, so I was interviewed once, but it was nothing like a regular television interview. I was only asked a few questions. They didn't really get into any of the big stuff with me, which is interesting because I was with Don for 2 years before he disappeared.
Let's talk about that time you spent with Don and some of his relationships. Do you know of anyone who might have wanted to hurt Mr. Clark?
Okay, well, the first thing that comes to mind is Lisa Clark.
Who's Lisa Clark?
Lisa Clark was Don's ex-wife.
Excuse me, Your Honor. I object speculation to that previous answer.
Mr. Reese?
Your Honor, this is rationally based on the witness's perception, based off of the 2 years that she spent with Mr. Clark at that elephant park.
What about that, Ms. Curphey?
One cannot rationally perceive a desire to hurt somebody else. Rational perception would be something like, I saw given action, or I heard her say she wanted to hurt Don Clark. Well, no such evidence exists in this case.
So what you're saying, Ms. Curphey, is that there's no foundation for the basis of the witness opinion?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Reese?
Your Honor, the foundation is that she spent 2 years with Mr. Clark filming at that elephant park. She would know about his personal relationships.
It's your objection, Ms. Curphey. You want the last word?
Yes, Your Honor. Even if she spent 2 years working with Don Clark, she didn't spend 2 years working with Lisa Clark, who this statement is about. But more importantly, she still cannot perceive another human being's intent to inflict harm on Don Clark. It's impossible to draw that conclusion based on one's rational perceptions. It is speculative.
So if this witness saw Lisa Clark pointing a loaded pistol, or better yet, holding a loaded syringe of carfentanil right above the thigh of Don Clark, could this witness rationally perceive intent to harm?
Legally speaking, Your Honor, no. No witness, expert or lay witness, can speak to another human being's criminal intent.
Based on the arguments before the court, which bind the court, and based on the court's role under Article 1 of the Rules of Evidence, to have faith in the jury, the court will let this statement in and overrule the objection because it goes to weight. And Mr. Reese, you may continue.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Miss Young, who is Lisa Clark?
Lisa Clark is Don Clark's ex-wife.
And you mentioned that she would have wanted to hurt him. Why do you think that?
Lisa is someone straight out of a horror film. I mean, I could literally cast her from one of those type of movies. But she would come to the park, right? And there was one time that she came and she wouldn't leave. She was screaming at Don. She was threatening him. It was intense.
What threats did Miss Clark make?
Oh, she was screaming, "I'll wipe you off the face of the earth and you'll be sorry."
Let's talk more about Mr. Clark's disappearance. Did you ever try and investigate that on your own?
I did, yes. I felt like I should be a little bit like Sherlock Holmes. So I went to his home in Costa Rica myself.
Did you find anything there?
I did. So I went into the home and I saw the place was completely spotless. I mean, there was no dust, there was a fan on, and Don's clothes were actually in the closet. It looked like he had been there recently. And this was a whole year after he went missing.
Did the FBI ever ask you about that trip to Costa Rica?
No, they didn't. They barely asked me anything. In fact, I was asked more questions on my interview for the TV show 64 Minutes than I was by the FBI.
Thank you, Miss Young. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Mr. Reese, thank you for your direct examination. Ms. Curphey, you may inquire by way of cross-examination of Joe Young.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Miss Young.
Good morning.
I'd like to start by discussing that trip to Costa Rica that you mentioned on cross-examination. You went and visited Don Clark's old home, correct?
I did, yes, his place in Hermosa Beach.
In that home, you didn't find any food, did you?
No, I didn't.
There weren't any lights on, were there?
No.
You didn't find any toiletries.
No.
And you were in Costa Rica for a week, right?
Yes, I was. This was after he disappeared a year before.
Did you see anyone, including Don Clark, come or go from that house the entire week that you were there?
No.
Okay. Let's also discuss your relationship with the defendant. You were paid by Miss Bassett, correct?
Well, yes, of course. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but my work is pretty good. So, yes, I do require payment for my work on the documentary.
You were paid $5,000 a month plus 20% profit from her documentary, right?
Yeah, that's pretty standard in the film industry.
These payments stopped when Miss Bassett was arrested, correct?
Yes.
You haven't been able to work with Miss Bassett since her arrest.
That is true. The focus of the documentary is on the elephant park, so we wanted to keep it on that, not really this whole arrest situation.
I do understand that you worked quite closely with Miss Bassett prior to her arrest. Would you say that's a fair description?
Yeah, yes.
Based on your observations, Miss Bassett was passionate about caring for elephants that lived in the park, right?
Yes, she was.
But the defendant and Mr. Clark didn't agree on how those elephants should be treated, did they?
No, they had some arguments that I've seen a lot of couples have, but it added a little spice into the documentary, so I can't complain.
Well, Miss Bassett expressed anger towards Don Clark for the way that he ran the park, correct?
Oh, yeah, a few times.
They fought over the way the park was run, correct?
Yeah.
You witnessed Miss Bassett throw a vase at Don Clark's head over the way the park was run, correct?
Well, yes, there was a time that it got a little heated, but after that, they reconciled and then they were all okay again. They were happy to go to Kara.
This was in summer of 2017, right?
Yeah, yes.
Don Clark went missing in summer of 2017, correct?
That is true, yes.
To be clear, you watched the defendant behave violently towards Don Clark weeks before his disappearance.
Well, to be fair, it was a heated argument. I wouldn't say it was violent. Yes, she threw something at him, but, it wasn't her strongest moment. And after that, they reconciled,
So that's a yes, she threw something at him before his disappearance.
Yeah.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
What about that, Ms. Curphey?
That specific question has not been asked.
Would it be fair to say you were resetting the stage?
I was trying to clarify what the witness said, as her answer really contained two responses.
Yeah, Mr. Reese, the problem the court has here is the witness was asked about a conclusion using the adjective violent. The witness denied violence and said no, talked about heated. And the question, therefore, may go to the same behavior, but as Ms. Curphey indicated, she's trying to drill down and understand where this witness's tolerance are for some of the lay conclusion words that are being bandied about. So although the question, in essence, did you see the vase, did you see Ms. Bassett throw the vase at Mr. Clark, has been asked and answered, not in this context has it been asked and answered. So on those narrow grounds, the objection's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Young, to clarify, you witnessed the defendant throw a vase at the victim's head, at Don Clark's head, weeks before his disappearance.
Yes, that's true.
And you wouldn't clarify throwing a vase at someone's head to be violent.
I would call it heated. Kara, I don't think she would have wanted to hurt Dawn. I mean, she loved him. That was her soulmate. She called him her gentle giant. But yes, I will admit that throwing a vase was not her finest moment.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation to the middle portion of that response.
What, that she's a golden child or something like that?
Yes, Your Honor.
That's overruled. Kara hired her. It goes to wait, if to anything. So that's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Are you familiar with Exhibit 34, a petition for injunction filed by Mr. Clark? And I'd ask that this be displayed on screen, please.
Your Honor, I believe that this exhibit actually is not entered into evidence yet.
Right, but it's the only way to, if you will, show the document to the witness. So it's constructively, if we were in court, simply in the witness's hands.
Yes, Your Honor.
So let's please display the exhibit that counsel asked for.
Are you familiar with this particular exhibit?
Not specifically, no.
Your Honor, I would note for the court that this has been entered into evidence previously.
Okay.
So this witness can testify about it with regards to Mr. Reese's earlier statement.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
I'm going to give you a choice, Mr. Reese. You can let me talk next.
You can go right ahead.
You could, thank you. There's no objection and there's no question before the court. The court has nothing to do right now. There is a document that is, if we were in court, in the witness's hands. It's Exhibit 34.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may ask a question.
Ms. Young, I'm going to read from that blue section on the second page, which you're looking at now. Mr. Clark wrote that the defendant had told him, quote, "Let me run the park my way or I'm going to kill you." Did I read that correctly?
Your Honor, hearsay.
Ms. Curphey, what about that?
This would here fall under the hearsay exception.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is 34 in evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Reese, explain your objection.
Your Honor, Exhibit 34 is actually not in evidence. Exhibits 4 through 33 were pre-admitted, not 34.
Ms. Curphey, what about that?
As I understand, all exhibits following Exhibit 4, so Exhibits 4 through 48, are in evidence.
Second to go back to my all legal documents. Evidentiary rulings number 7, exhibits 4 through 33 are pre-admitted and may be used at any time for any purpose.
My apologies, I'll enter that exhibit.
Are you offering it right now, or are you telling me that you're withdrawing the question and want to ask other questions?
I'll withdraw my question and lay some foundation.
Very well, you may continue.
Ms. Young, did you recognize that handwriting on that document?
You have to understand, I haven't seen that document, really. I'm not familiar with that.
Was it your testimony you've never seen that document before?
Well, I mean, I've seen it in an interview, but I didn't know about it before.
Or did you recognize the handwriting on that document?
I mean, sure, yeah.
Did it appear to be Don Clark's handwriting?
Yeah, I would say so.
At this time, Your Honor, the people move Exhibit 34 into evidence.
Mr. Reese,
Objection, hearsay.
Ms. Curphey.
That would fall under the hearsay exception, statement made under fear of imminent death, Your Honor.
Say more about that.
Excuse me.
What more can you say in support of that position?
Well, Don Clark filed this petition for injunction with the court under the fear that Cara Bassett was going to kill him. That's stated within the exhibit, because this was a statement made under fear of imminent death, fear of being murdered by Miss Bassett. It isn't hearsay.
Mr. Reese.
Your Honor, this exception does not apply in this instance. In order for a statement to be to be an exception to hearsay because it was made under the belief of imminent death, that belief would have to be, as indicated, imminent. And Mr. Clark didn't believe at the time he was writing this injunction that he would be imminently killed by Miss Clark, maybe at some later point, but it doesn't meet this exception.
Mr. Reese, define the word imminent.
Yes, Your Honor. Imminent would be that it would be occurring within the next few moments, specifically, or that the witness would believe that it would be occurring, or that it would about to occur, Your Honor. Imminent would be that it is soon approaching, that it is going to happen.
You would agree, Mr. Reese, that this is a court-prepared form. The typewritten portion is court-prepared?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you would also agree that the language in the court-prepared form requests that the petitioner, here Don Clark, indicate why the petitioner has an honest fear of imminent domestic violence.
Yes, Your Honor. Imminent domestic violence, not imminent death.
I'm focused not on domestic violence versus death. By your definition, somebody sitting in the safety of the courthouse with bailiffs and court officers would never have an imminent fear of domestic violence or death, right?
Well, yes, Your Honor, that's true.
So shouldn't I let this in? Or is there something else you want to tell me about the document?
Well, no, Your Honor, this should not be entered into evidence because it still does not meet that exception. A statement under the belief of imminent death, this document was filed as a statement under the belief of domestic violence, even though it uses the word imminent in it. That doesn't change the fact that he didn't believe he was about to immediately that he was about to be killed by Miss Clark.
Is there anything in the content of the statement, Mr. Reese, that you want to point to, or anything elsewhere in the document you want to point to with regard to your objection? And Ms. Curphey, stand by. You're about to get asked the same question.
Well, yes, Your Honor. The rest of this document or the other statements made within this document aren't statements made under the belief of imminent death. There are a few that are made that relate to that imminent death, but the rest of the documents do not, or the rest of the statements do not.
Ms. Curphey, what more about the handwritten statement, or what more about the document do you want to tell me?
Well, the people obviously believe that murder would be an act of domestic violence if it takes place between a husband and a wife. Well, the victim is asked to describe why he fears imminent domestic violence. His statement is, "I'm afraid she's going to kill me in my sleep." He's saying that he fears this particular act of domestic violence being murder. And because of the context being explain an imminent fear, this is absolutely admissible under that hearsay exception.
Are you asking that the entire document be admitted?
Yes, Your Honor.
Based on the argument before the court, and only the argument before the court, the words here fit, at a minimum, a hearsay exception with regard to imminent death. They fit a state of mind exception, which is fear. And on that narrow basis, constrained by the argument before the court, and without considering whether I am bound by any other judge's ruling, the statement is in. You may continue.
Could we have that exhibit on the screen again, please? And I'm going to read a statement when you see that exhibit. Please confirm. I'm afraid she's going to kill me in my sleep. Did I read that correctly, Miss Young?
Yes, you did.
Are you familiar with the particular instance which is described here? She took my .357 revolver and hid it.
No, I'm not. I didn't even know if there was a gun. I never saw a gun on the property, though. I mean, that would make for excellent TV, but no, I did not find that.
To clarify, this is an instance of violent or aggressive behavior by the defendant that you're unaware of.
I mean, sure. I mean, that's what this document is saying, but again, I never saw any of this.
Well, this relates to how the park was run, correct?
Sure. Again, that's what the document's saying. I never saw this in person. This is pretty surprising. Yeah, that's what the document's saying.
I'd now like to draw your attention to Exhibit 36. If we can have that displayed on screen, please. And Ms. Young, just going forward, I would really greatly appreciate if you could constrain your answers to the question that's being asked. Do you recognize this exhibit as part of an interview you filmed a few months before Don Clark's disappearance?
Yes, I do.
Does this appear to be a truthful and accurate depiction? Obviously, we can't play it yet, but does this appear to be a truthful depiction of that interview?
From the still shot, I see, yes.
This time, the people move Exhibit 36 into evidence.
Mr. Reese,
Without objection, Your Honor.
it's in.
We play that video, please?
Oh, I'm steaming. This is a business, not a charity. As long as it's my money, we'll run it that way. That's what Don said to me. Can you believe that? We'll see how this ends.
Ms. Young, is the park still run like a, quote, business, not a charity? Yes or no?
It did change since Don left, yes.
I'd now like to bring your attention to Exhibit 42, which you filmed a few months after Don Clark's disappearance, right? And could we have that on screen as well? Does this also appear to be the interview that you filmed?
Yes, it does.
At this time, the people move Exhibit 42 into evidence.
Mr. Reese,
Without objection, Your Honor.
that is in.
Hi there, all you cool calves and pachyderms. Kara Bassett here with a big announcement. I'm turning this park into a sanctuary. For too long, it's been a zoo, a tourist attraction, but now it's going to be a place where we save baby elephants who have been orphaned or injured. It's what I've always wanted, and it's what Don would have wanted.
So to clarify, Miss Young, according to this video, just a few months after Don Clark's disappearance, Kara Bassett had changed the nature of the park entirely.
Yes, that's true.
And she's here talking about Mr. Clark in past tense. Do you know if he was considered legally dead at that time?
Not yet, no, but as he had been missing for a few months, she was trying to move on, so she wouldn't want to bring him up all the time.
Okay. Well, I'm really trying to grasp the chronology of these events. I'm going to make a statement about the order in which all of this happened, and I'd like you to tell me if I'm understanding correctly. You filmed an interview with Miss Bassett, Exhibit 36, in which she expressed discontent with the way the park was run. Then you witnessed Miss Bassett throw a vase at Mr. Clark's head. Then Mr. Clark went missing. Then about 2 months later, Miss Bassett turned the park into an elephant sanctuary, as we just saw in Exhibit 42. Is that the order in which those events happened?
That is the order. However, you're missing quite a few events.
I'm asking specifically. Miss Bassett expressed discontent. Miss Bassett threw a vase at Mr. Clark's head. Mr. Clark disappeared. Miss Bassett changed the nature of the park entirely, yes or no?
Sure, but missing a few events.
Thank you, Miss Young. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Reese,
Yes, Your Honor.
anything further for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Redirect examination.
You may inquire.
Miss Young, you were just asked a lot about Mr. Clark's relationship with his wife. How would you describe that relationship?
With Kara? Okay, so Dawn loved to tease her and they would dote on each other. Yes, of course, they had arguments like any couple, but they were mainly happy. And as of August 2018, from what I saw, they were in a really good place.
Did Miss Bassett ever do anything at any point that made you think she might want to hurt her husband?
Oh, no. Kara wouldn't do that. I mean, yes, she was passionate about the elephants, but she also loved Dawn.
Thank you, Miss Young. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Reese. Ms. Curphey, you have nothing further for the witness?
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Does the defense want to do anything else?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the defense rests.
Very well. Both sides having rested, we'll move to closing arguments. Before we hear closing arguments, everyone should switch back to speaker. Complete the witness portion of their ballot. In our jurisdiction, the party with the burden of proof goes first. Ms. Curphey, that is you. The court will hear from you by way of closing argument on behalf of the United States. Begin whenever you would like.
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Bassett got exactly what she wanted. Now it's time she gets what she deserves. On June 18th, Cara Bassett went to the park storage facility. She retrieved a single carfentanil syringe. Just a few drops of this would kill her husband. She goes back home, injects the tranquilizer into Don Clark, killing him. She texts herself from his phone, puts her husband in a wheelchair, transports his corpse to the company van, drives to a swamp, dumps the body, his wallet and keys, drives to the airport where he kept his plane, abandons the van. A week passes. She makes no attempt to contact him. No texts, no calls, because she knows he's dead. Because she killed him. After his body had been in the swamp for a week, she reports him missing. She seizes his assets, which she can legally do thanks to the power of attorney agreement that specifically states she would retrieve all of his assets in the case of his disappearance. She changes the park from a tourist attraction to a sanctuary, as she wanted all along. The defendant got exactly what she wanted, but she must face justice. That's why the people of the United States of America have charged Cara Bassett with murder in the first degree, the unlawful killing of another human being with malice aforethought. So let's break that down, starting with malice aforethought. How do we know that the defendant wanted and intended to kill Don Clark? Without knowing it, Mr. Clark had left behind a paper trail. He'd filed for a restraining order against the defendant. He'd given the defendant all the motive she needed by signing that power of attorney agreement. The defense's own witness, who was paid by the defendant, testified to the violent outbursts, throwing a vase at Mr. Clark's head, although she testified that this was regular marital discourse. Then there's that text, supposedly sent by Don Clark on the night of his murder. If you believe that the defendant sent herself a text to cover up for her crime, that's malice. But even if you accept the premise that Don Clark sent that text, that he was going out, well, we know he didn't go out, because the defendant made no effort to contact him for a week, which is otherwise unexplainable. And he was never seen again. The only explanation for those text messages is that the defendant saw the texts and thought, here's my chance. I have to act now. And that is malice aforethought. Either she saw the texts and decided to kill him, or she decided to kill him, then sent those texts. Either way, she acted with malice. Which brings us to the crucial second element. Did she follow through with the killing? Through GPS, DNA, and trace forensics, we have the story of that night, and it convicts Miss Bassett. GPS tells us that the van took a highly unusual route on the night of Don Clark's disappearance, according to Exhibit 31. The van was driven almost 140 miles to Big Gum Swamp. People do not typically go to this park recreationally at night. Agent Branham uncovered no reason for Don Clark to have gone to the swamp at night. Cara Bassett claimed she never went, but this was a lie. Special Agent Branham told you that she received a forensic report analyzing mud on the defendant's shoes and mud from the swamp. They were a match. So Cara Bassett has been to the swamp. And members of the jury, don't be distracted by the defense's claims. Yes, Ms. Bassett worked in the Elephant Park. Yes, she got mud on her shoes. But we're not just talking about any mud. This is an exact match. An exact match in the chemical makeup of this mud. It places Ms. Bassett at the park. In the back of the van in question, forensic technicians collected 6 hairs belonging to Don Clark. 6 of the victim's hairs in the back of the van that was driven by the defendant, leaving behind that mud the night he went missing. And then it was abandoned also by the defendant. The forensic evidence tells the story of that night. It tells of Cara Bassett's disposal of the body, dumping the victim into the swamp, using a wheelchair to transport his dead body before abandoning it at an airport a few miles from her home. Again, the mud on the wheelchair tells us what happened. And if she disposed of the body, Cara Bassett killed Don Clark. The forensic evidence proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Cara Bassett killed Don Clark. After her husband had been missing for a week, having made no attempt to contact him, Cara Bassett reported Don Clark missing. After a few months, she took control of his assets, and after a year, she had him declared legally dead. The defense will get up here in just a moment and tell you that something else happened, that Mr. Clark was mixed up with the wrong crowd, or that he ran away, abandoning not only his wife, but his son. They will not be able to explain why he went to the swamp that night. They will not be able to explain why his van was abandoned. They will not be able to explain why the mud on the defendant's shoes matched that swamp, matched that van, matched that wheelchair. They will not be able to explain why his airplane was still in its hangar. They will not be able to explain why he had no transactions on his bank account since his disappearance. It's because the only explanation is that Cara Bassett killed Don Clark. Cara Bassett got what she wanted. It's time she gets what she deserves. Find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree. Thank you.
Ms. Curphey, thank you for your closing argument. Mr. Reese, we already know that you're going to get up and say that the victim was mixed up with the wrong crowd and abandoned his wife and son. So do you really need to close, or do you want to take a shot at it?
Your Honor, I'd like to close, I think.
Very well. The court will hear from you whenever you're ready.
Thank you. A rush to judgment. Members of the jury, everything that Ms. Curphey just told you was a rush to judgment. And that's a problem for the government. It's a problem because today it was Ms. Curphey's burden alone to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Bassett deliberately and intentionally caused the death of her husband. And I want to be clear about what that burden means, because it is the highest burden in our legal system. When it comes to meeting that burden, Ms. Curphey, she couldn't just be close. She had to get it right. She had to get it so right, there is not a reasonable option other than her story. And members of the jury, there are reasonable options because there are reasonable questions left in this case. So let's talk about the questions that Ms. Curphey left unanswered. Question number 1, who was driving that van that went to the Big Gum Swamp? You heard from Agent Branham, those GPS records alone don't tell her who was driving that car. And now Ms. Curphey tried to tell you it had to be Miss Bassett, because that algae on her shoes, it was an exact match to the algae in the Big Gum Swamp. But that just raises a second question. Question number 2, where did that algae really come from? Members of the jury, you saw this report. Ms. Curphey can tell you it's an exact match all you want. That doesn't change the fact that they never tested that elephant park for algae. How do we know that the algae at that elephant park wasn't an exact match? Joe Young told you it's muddy, it's dirty, Miss Bassett would walk through it in her boots. But we can't know if that algae matches because the government never tested. They rushed to judgment. And question number 3, when did that algae get there? Agent Branham told you the algae alone doesn't explain when it got on those surfaces. We know it doesn't explain how it got on those surfaces. It could have been there months before Mr. Clark disappeared. So that brings us to question number 4. Because members of the jury, that algae and those GPS records, they don't really tell us anything. But if Miss Curphey's theory is true, if Mr. Clark was actually taken in that van to the Big Gum Swamp, someone had to be driving. And now Miss Curphey's telling you, we can't explain why Mr. Clark would just drive to that swamp. Members of the jury, if he was trying to get away from everything, he would have driven to that swamp and he would have dumped his possessions in it. We don't know if any possessions were found because those dogs that searched that swamp didn't find anything. Agent Branham didn't find anything. And we can think of someone else who would have driven Mr. Clark to that swamp. That's question number 4. Who would have wanted to hurt Don Clark? Let's start with Lisa Clark. His ex-wife, someone who the government rushed past. Today you heard that she had threatened Mr. Clark before. She was sharing her children with him. She was prone to outbursts around him, and she knew where he lived. We didn't have to prove that Miss Clark killed her ex-husband. Miss Curphey had to prove that she didn't. Question number 5, who was calling and texting Mr. Clark the night he disappeared? At 6 p.m., Mr. Clark got 2 texts from a number in Costa Rica telling him to call that person immediately. And Miss Young, she told you what happened when he got those texts. Mr. Clark looked down at his phone and his face went white. He was scared of that person. And then he had to spend 52 minutes on a call with them, just hours before he went missing. Members of the jury, he was mixed up with the wrong crowd. We don't know if those people didn't do something to him. And that's question number 6. Are those people from Costa Rica responsible for his disappearance? Agent Branham told you it's possible he was involved with the Costa Rican mafia. It's reasonable to say that because of those texts, because of that call, because of how scared Mr. Clark was, those people could have had something to do with his disappearance. But Agent Branham can't even tell you that person's name. They rushed to judgment. And question number 7, if Mr. Clark is really dead, where is his body? Again, members of the jury, those dogs, they didn't find anything when they searched for Mr. Clark. So question number 8, is he still alive? Let's go back to Joe Young's testimony. She told you that when she went to Mr. Clark's house in Costa Rica, a fan was still on. The place was spotless, and Mr. Clark's clothes were hanging in the closet. She told you that was an entire year after Mr. Clark went missing. And while we're on Miss Young's testimony, question number 9, what was on that footage? The government rushed right past it. So finally, question number 10. Did Miss Bassett really get exactly what she wanted? You heard from Miss Young that sure, her and her husband would argue. She threw a vase at his head, but members of the jury, that doesn't mean she would kill him. Are you really supposed to believe that what she wanted was her husband dead over an elephant park? Those were 10 reasonable questions that the government rushed past. And because of that, they have not met their burden. Find Miss Bassett not guilty. Thank you.
Mr. Reese, thank you for your closing argument on behalf of your client. Ms. Curphey, do you have anything further?
I would inquire as to how much time remains for rebuttal, Your Honor.
Well, let's ask. Minute 30.
Hey, Victoria's just about done. If she calls me, I'm going to cut over to her because they have limited time in between.
Right.
Okay, so they were both set up as the defense witness this
Yeah.
round.
Am I the only one hearing all that, Steve?
Morris?
May I proceed, Your Honor? I'm
Not yet. I want you to wait a minute. I want to make sure that we're back.
Okay.
You saw- All right. Where we are right now, Ms. Curphey, the answer to your question, according to the timekeepers, is 1 minute, 30 seconds. Do you wish to do anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll present a rebuttal.
Very well. You may begin whenever you're ready.
A rush to judgment. But over a year passed from when Don Clark disappeared to when Miss Bassett was arrested. During that year, forensic evidence was collected, interviews were conducted. The Costa Rican authorities were contacted. During that year, Don Clark didn't spend a penny if he's hiding out somewhere. Let's ask the questions, members of the jury. Why did forensic evidence place Miss Bassett behind the wheel of the van that Don Clark's hair was found in? Why did Don Clark say, "I'm afraid she's going to kill me in my sleep," and request a restraining order against the defendant? Why did Agent Branham stand to find that Miss Lisa Clark stood to make no financial gain, whereas Miss Bassett inherited everything? Why did Miss Bassett agree to this power of attorney clause, which specifically stated, should Don Clark disappear, not die of random causes, not be killed by Costa Rican mobsters, disappear, she would get everything. Cara Bassett got what she wanted. Find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree. Thank you.